The guild hall stank of cheap ale and desperation. Kael stood at the counter, his threadbare cloak hanging loose on his thin frame, as a group of children pointed and laughed. "Look, it's the F rank!" one boy shouted, throwing a crust of bread that bounced off Kael's shoulder. "Maybe he can clean our boots next." The adults nearby snickered, but none intervened. Kael's jaw tightened, but he said nothing. He had learned long ago that words were a luxury he couldn't afford. "Kael." The guild receptionist, a stout woman with tired eyes, slid a parchment across the counter. "Sewer duty. Clear out the backlog of refuse in Sector 3. Report back by sundown." She didn't meet his gaze. She never did. He took the parchment and left without a word. The sewers were a punishment detail, filthy, dangerous, and beneath even the lowest ranked adventurer. But Kael had no choice. At F rank, he was barely stronger than a common rat, and the guild made sure he knew it. The entrance to Sector 3 was a rusted iron grate in an alley behind the guild. Kael pried it open and descended into the gloom. The smell hit him first: rotten meat, stagnant water, and something metallic. He lit a lantern and waded through ankle-deep sludge, his boots squelching with every step. Half an hour in, he found the trash pile. It rose like a small mountain of discarded junk, broken crates, shattered pottery, and rusted weapons. But one object caught his eye: a sword, buried hilt-deep in a mound of rotting rags. The blade was blackened with rust, the crossguard twisted like a skeletal hand. Something about it made Kael's skin prickle. He reached out and grasped the hilt. Pain exploded through his palm. The rust seemed to bite into his flesh, drawing blood. He tried to let go, but his hand was locked tight. Then a voice slithered into his mind, deep and amused. "You're pathetic." "But I can fix that." Kael gasped, stumbling back. The sword came with him, still fused to his grip. "What are you?" "I am the maw of the end. A god killer. And you, little worm, are the weakest vessel I've ever had the misfortune to bond with." The voice paused, as if savoring his fear. "But I can make you strong. All you have to do is take a lethal risk. Face something that should kill you. Survive, and I'll feast on its essence. You'll grow." Kael's heart pounded. "Lethal risk? I'll die." "Probably," the sword said cheerfully. "But if you don't, you'll never be anything more than a sewer rat. Your choice." Kael stared at the rusted blade. He thought of the laughing children, the dismissive receptionist, the endless menial tasks. He thought of the troll that had been sighted near the sewers, a monster that had already killed 3 adventurers. The guild had posted a warning, but no one had volunteered to deal with it. "There's a troll," Kael said, his voice barely a whisper. "In the lower tunnels." "Perfect," the sword purred. "Lead the way." The troll was a hulking brute of matted fur and yellowed tusks, crouched in a cavern where the sewer opened into a natural cave. It was feeding on the carcass of a giant rat, its jaws crunching bone. When it saw Kael, it rose to its full height, easily 12 feet, and roared. Kael's legs trembled. The sword's voice was calm. "Wait for it to charge. Aim for the eye. Don't miss." The troll lunged, a massive claw swiping through the air. Kael dove sideways, but the claw caught his side, tearing through his cloak and flesh. Pain seared through him as he hit the ground, blood soaking his tunic. The troll turned, raising a foot to crush him. "No!" The sword screamed. Kael rolled, ignoring the agony, and drove the rusted blade upward. The sword punched through the troll's eye socket, sinking deep into its brain. The monster froze, then collapsed with a ground-shaking thud. For a moment, there was silence. Then the sword began to glow. A dark, hungry light spread from the blade, and Kael felt a surge of energy flood into him. His wounds knitted closed. His muscles swelled. His vision sharpened. The world seemed sharper, clearer. "Not bad," the sword said, its voice tinged with approval. "Your stats have doubled. You're still weak, but less pathetically so." Kael pulled the sword free and stared at his reflection in the blood-smeared blade. For the first time, he saw something other than fear in his own eyes. The sword's voice grinned. "Good. Now, let's find something worth eating." Dawn broke gray and cold over the guild hall, its stone walls slit with mist. Kael pushed open the heavy oak doors, the troll's severed head dripping blood onto the flagstones. The hall fell silent. Adventurers at the morning meal turned, mugs frozen mid-air, ice white. The head was massive jagged tusks, milky eye, skin like cracked leather. It thumped as Kael dropped it on the floor, the sound echoing. A child, no older than 12, pointed. That's a troll. He killed a troll. Murmurs rippled. Kael felt their stares like needles. His hands were still raw from the fight. The source was a low hum in his skull. They thought. Let them. Their fear will taste sweeter later. Guildmaster Varn emerged from his office, his polished boots clicking against stone. He stopped before the head, face unreadable. His eyes, cold and calculating, swept over Kael. Explain, Varn said, voice flat. Found it in the lower tunnels, Kael said, keeping his tone even. It attacked. I killed it. An F-rank killing a troll, Varn repeated, a thin smile playing on his lips. Remarkable. Or suspicious. He stepped closer, lowering his voice. I'm assigning you to a goblin nest extermination. Party LED by Ilara. Report to the East Gate in 1 hour. Kael's stomach tightened. The goblin nest was notorious a warren of tunnels near the old quarry, swarming with dozens of the creatures. A death sentence. But the sword pulsed with hunger. Goblins. Weak, but many. Except. Understood, Kael said. Varn's smile widened. Good. Don't disappoint. Ilara's party was waiting at the East Gate. 3 seasoned adventurers. Ilara, a tall woman with sharp cheekbones and a short sword at her hip. A scarred man named Rorik, who carried a heavy shield. And a wiry archer, Lyra, with a bow slung across her back. They looked at Kael with barely concealed disdain. This is the F rank. Lyra muttered. He'll slow us down. Orders from Varn, Ilara said, her gaze cold. He stays in the back. Don't get in our way, and maybe you'll survive. They marched in silence through the morning mist. The quarry loomed ahead, a jagged wound in the earth. The goblin nest was a dark mouth in the rock face, reeking of rot and filth. Kael's hand rested on the sword's hilt. Its warmth was a comfort. Standard sweep, Ilara commanded. Rorik, front. Lyra, cover. Kael, your rear guard. Don't engage unless we're overwhelmed. They entered. The tunnel was narrow, walls slick with moisture. Goblins shrieked in the darkness, their eyes glinting like red coals. The first wave came fast. 5 goblins, crude blades in hand. Rorik's shield blocked the charge. Lyra's arrows took 2 down. Ilara moved like water, her sword flashing, cutting down a third. But more came. A flood of green-skinned bodies, pouring from side tunnels. The party was pushed back, forced into a defensive circle. We're being overrun. Rorik shouted, his shield cracking under a heavy blow. Ilara's eyes darted to Kael. If you have anything, now's the time. Kael drew the sword. Its blade seemed to drink the dim light, edges shimmering with a faint violet sheen. The sword whispered, feed me. He stepped forward, ignoring Ilara's shout of protest. A goblin lunged. He sidestepped, the sword's point finding its throat. Another came from the left. He pivoted, the blade carving through its ribs. The sword drank deeply, and Kael felt a surge of power, a lightness in his limbs, a clarity in his vision. Enhanced agility. Enhanced endurance. He moved through the goblins like a ghost. Each kill was a heartbeat, a pulse of warmth. The sword hummed with pleasure. 10 goblins fell before the rest broke, fleeing deeper into the nest. Silence. The tunnel was strewn with bodies. Rorik stared, his mouth open. Lyra lowered her bow, disbelief in her eyes. Ilara walked up to Kael, her expression unreadable. She studied him, her gaze lingering on the sword. You're hiding something, she said, her voice low and cold. And I will find out. Kael met her eyes, saying nothing. The sword vibrated softly, a promise of more to come. The alley behind the Rusty Nail Tavern stank of stale ale and rotting fish. Kael pressed a hand to his side, where a fresh gash wiped warm blood through his tattered tunic. The encounter had been sudden, a flash of steel, a grunt of exertion, and now a man lay crumpled against the damp cobblestones, his dagger skittering into the shadows. Kael's breath came in ragged gasps. He sensed the ambush a heartbeat too late. The rogue had materialized from the darkness like a wraith, blade aimed for his kidney. Only a desperate twist and a surge of enhanced agility had saved him from a fatal blow. Now the wound burned, a deep, pulsing ache that promised infection if left untended. "Fool," hissed the voice in his skull, the cursed sword, maw of the end, its tongue dripping with contempt. "You nearly died. Again." Kael gritted his teeth, forcing himself upright. The rogue stirred, a low moan escaping his lips. He was young, perhaps 20, with a scarred face and the cheap leather armor of a desperate man. His eyes fluttered open, widening with fear as he saw Kael looming over him, the black blade of the maw reflecting the faint moonlight. "Please," the rogue croaked, raising a trembling hand. "I was paid. Varn," he offered gold. "I didn't know you were." "Lies," the sword whispered, its voice a cold caress. "He knew exactly what I am. He wanted me for himself. Kill him, Kael, or I will find a new wielder." Kael's hand tightened on the hilt. The sword's hunger pulsed through him, a gnawing void that demanded satiation. He remembered the goblin nest, how the essence of each slain creature had flowed into him, making his muscles sing with newfound strength. But this was different. This was a man. A living, breathing human. "I can't," Kael muttered, his voice barely audible. "He's defenseless." The sword laughed, a sound like grinding bones. "Defenseless? He tried to gut you. He would have sold your corpse to Varn for a handful of silver. You think mercy has a place in this world? Look around you, boy. The guild despises you. The gods hunt us. Every hand is raised against you. Show weakness now, and you will be devoured." Kael's gaze swept the alley. The rogue's dagger lay glinting in the gutter. A few feet away, a rat scurried over a pile of refuse, its eyes glinting with vermin intelligence. The world felt cold, indifferent, a place where only the strong survived. The rogue tried to crawl away, dragging his broken leg. "No, please, I have a family." "Lies," the sword repeated, its voice hardening. "He has no one. He is a tool, discarded by Varn. Grant him a clean death, or I will take control and make it slow." Kael's vision swam. The wound in his side throbbed, a constant reminder of his mortality. He thought of the troll, the goblins, the rush of power that came with each kill. Was he becoming a monster? Or had he always been one, waiting for the right excuse? "Do it," the sword urged, its tone almost tender. "Embrace what you are becoming. Or die here, in this gutter, and let the rats feast on your failure." Kael raised the blade. The rogue screamed, a high, piercing sound that echoed off the stone walls. The maw descended. Silence. When Kael opened his eyes, the rogue lay still, a dark pool spreading beneath him. The sword hummed with satisfaction, and a wave of energy flooded Kael's body, warm, electric, intoxicating. His wound knitted itself closed, the flesh sealing with a faint tingle. New knowledge bloomed in his mind, the rogue's skills, his muscle memory, his years of practice in the art of shadows. Shadow step, the sword purred. A useful trick. You can now move between shadows, appearing where your enemies least expect. But this was a snack, Kael. A morsel. "I want a feast." Kael stared at his hands. They were steady, strong. The blood on them seemed almost black in the dim light. He sheathed the sword, its weight a familiar comfort against his hip. "What do you want?" he asked, his voice hollow. The sword's laugh was soft, almost affectionate. "Everything. The guild master's power. The champion's pride. The Inquisitor's faith. And beyond them, the gods themselves. But first, we must survive the night. Varn knows you live. He will send more." Kael stepped over the corpse and walked into the shadows, the darkness swallowing him whole. Behind him, the alley fell silent, save for the drip of blood and the distant howl of a hound. He was learning, and the world would soon learn to fear him. The morning air in the guild hall was thick with whispers that clung to Kael like cobwebs. He stood at the notice board, pretending to scan the meager F-rank quests, but he could feel the stares boring into his back. A pair of merchants near the hearth spoke just loud enough for him to hear. "Did you hear? That Kael fellow, the one who killed the troll, they say he made a pact with a demon. I heard he drinks blood to fuel his power. The guild master himself warned the council about him." Kael's jaw tightened. Xinghao Varn. Of course, Xinghao, the guild master's rumors were efficient poison, spreading through the ranks like rot in a wound. It was larger than he'd imagined. Its scales were the color of dried blood, and its wings, folded against its back, looked like tattered leather sails. A ridge of spikes ran down its spine, and its eyes, when they snapped open, were the color of molten gold. It saw him. The wyvern's throat swelled, and Kael didn't hesitate. He activated Shadow Step, his body dissolving into a blur of darkness as a torrent of fire exploded from the wyvern's maw. The flames washed over the spot where he stood, turning stone to slag, but Kael was already behind it, sword drawn. He drove the blade into the base of its wing, where the scales were thinnest. The wyvern shrieked, a sound that shook the cave and sent loose rocks tumbling from the ceiling. It whipped its tail, catching Kael across the ribs and sending him crashing into the wall. Pain exploded through his side. He gasped, tasting blood, but the sword's hunger surged through him, numbing the agony. Again, the maw commanded, "Don't let it breathe." Kael rolled to his feet, ignoring the fire in his lungs. The wyvern was turning, its throat swelling for another blast. He shadow-stepped again, this time appearing directly in front of its face. The wyvern's eyes widened a fraction of a second of surprise, and Kael plunged the sword into its open mouth, through the soft palate, and into its brain. The wyvern convulsed, its body spasming wildly. Kael wrenched the blade free, black blood spraying across his face. The creature collapsed, its death rattle echoing through the cave like a dying thunderstorm. "Yes," the maw hissed, its voice triumphant. "Feed me." The sword began to glow, a deep crimson light that pulsed in rhythm with Kael's heartbeat. He felt the wyvern's essence flow into him, a torrent of raw power that burned through his veins like molten fire. His muscles bulged, his bones ached, and his vision sharpened until he could see every crack in the cave walls, every grain of dust in the air. His stats tripled. He knew it without needing a status screen. The world felt slower, more fragile, as if he could shatter it with a thought. And then the sword changed. The blade's edge rippled, and jagged teeth like those of a predator's maw grew along the steel. They glistened with a faint, hungry sheen. The hilt grew spikes that dug into Kael's palm, drawing blood, but the pain was distant, almost pleasant. "First evolution," the maw said, its voice deeper now, more ancient. "A taste of what's to come. Now, let's hunt bigger game." Kael stared at the transformed blade, at the wyvern's corpse steaming in the cold cave air, and smiled. The rumors, the conspiracy, Barnes scheming, it all seemed so small now. "Bigger game," he repeated. "I know just where to start." The arena was packed. Dust rose from the stone floor, kicked up by the boots of 100 spectators who lined the wooden bleachers. Banners of the Adventurers Guild hung limp in the stagnant air, their faded insignias crossed swords over a shield seeming to mock the very concept of honor. The annual tournament had begun, a tradition meant to showcase strength, but Kael knew it for what it truly was, a stage for the powerful to remind the weak of their place. He stood in the shadow of the archway leading into the arena, the maw of the end strapped across his back. The sword's jagged teeth, newly formed after devouring the wyvern's soul, seemed to hum against his spine. Its voice slithered into his mind, a dry rasp like stone grinding against bone. "They smell of fear and envy," the sword whispered. "Let me taste them." Kael said nothing. His eyes were fixed on the far end of the arena, where Guild Master Varn sat on a raised dais, his face a mask of practiced benevolence. Beside him stood a mountain of muscle and steel, Garrick, the B-rank champion. His armor was polished to a mere sheen, and his great sword, a slab of black iron as white as a man's chest, rested against his shoulder. He was the favorite, the inevitable victor, the symbol of everything the guild stood for. The first rounds were a blur of blood and bone. Adventurers clashed in pairs, their weapons ringing out like a blacksmith's forge. Kael watched from the waiting area, his arms crossed. The sword's hunger gnawed at him, a constant ache. But he held back. He let the lesser fighters exhaust themselves, their petty victories earning them nothing but bruises and cheers. When his name was called, the crowd's murmur turned to jeers. "F rank!" Someone shouted. "Get him out of here!" Another voice, "He's the one cursed by the sword." Kael stepped into the light, and the noise died for a moment, replaced by a tense curiosity. His first opponent was a C-rank swordsman named Dorn, a man with a scarred face and a sneer that never wavered. Dorn charged immediately, his blade aimed at Kael's throat. Kael sidestepped, drawing the maw of the end in a single, fluid motion. The sword's edge caught the sunlight, and for an instant, it seemed to glow with a faint crimson light. Kael swung not a full strike, but a tap. The flat of the blade connected with Dorn's temple, and the man crumpled like a puppet with cut strings. The crowd gasped. The referee hesitated, then declared Kael the winner. Round after round, the pattern repeated. Kael moved like a shadow, his steps guided by the sword's whispers. He parried, dodged, and struck with surgical precision, never using more force than necessary. By the time the semifinals arrived, the jeers had turned to whispers. The F rank was not a joke. He was a ghost. In the semifinal, he faced a woman named Sarah, a B-rank archer who peppered him with arrows from a distance. Kael used Shadow Step, vanishing into the dim corners of the arena, reappearing inches from her face. The sword's point rested against her throat before she could knock another arrow. She surrendered, her hands shaking. The final match was announced. Kael vs. Garrick. The crowd erupted. Garrick strode into the arena, his great sword held aloft like a banner. He stopped in the center, his eyes scanning the stands, drinking in the adulation. Then he turned to Kael, and his smile was cold. "So you're the freak everyone's been whispering about," Garrick said, his voice carrying easily over the noise. "You think killing a few weaklings makes you strong? I've slaughtered wyverns. I've crushed trolls with my bare hands. You're nothing but a rat with a shiny toothpick." Kael said nothing. He drew the maw of the end, and the sword's voice filled his mind. He slowed. "His arrogance is a weapon you can use." The referee raised his hand. "Begin." Garrick moved first, his great sword cleaving through the air with a sound like tearing silk. Kael sidestepped, but Garrick was faster than he looked. The blade's edge grazed Kael's shoulder, drawing a thin line of blood. The crowd roared. "Is that all?" Garrick laughed, pressing his attack. He swung again, a horizontal slash aimed at Kael's midsection. Kael jumped back, the sword's tip missing him by inches. "He's testing you," the maw whispered. "He wants to draw out the fight. End it." Kael's heart pounded. The wyvern's essence burned in his veins, a cold spring waiting to release. He planted his feet, and when Garrick lunged with a downward strike, Kael did not dodge. He stepped forward, into the attack. The crowd screamed. Garrick's eyes widened in shock. Kael raised the maw of the end, and the two blades met. There was a sound like a bell struck too hard, a resonant clang that seemed to hang in the air. Then a crack. Then the great sword shattered, its black iron shards raining down like hail. Garrick stumbled backward, his hands empty, his face a mask of disbelief. Kael's sword was still intact. The jagged teeth along its edge seemed to grin. "How?" Garrick whispered. Kael did not answer. He stepped forward, the mouse point hovering an inch from Garrick's throat. The champion fell to his knees, his arrogance shattered along with his blade. The arena was silent. Not a single cheer, not a single whisper. Every eye was on Kael, standing over the fallen champion, his sword still raised. On the dais, Varn rose from his seat. His face was pale, his hands gripping the armrests until his knuckles whitened. He stared at Kael as if seeing a ghost. "This is impossible," he said, his voice barely audible. "He's a monster." The sword's laughter echoed in Kael's mind. "Yes. And we are only getting started." The tournament crowd had dispersed, leaving the training grounds in an uneasy silence. Kael stood near the edge of the arena, his hand resting on the hilltop maw of the end. The sword's jagged teeth seemed to pulse with a faint, hungry light. He was still catching his breath when a shadow fell over him. Ilara. Her silver hair was pulled back in a tight braid, and her eyes cold, analytical bored into him. She wore her usual leather armor, but there was a new tension in her stance. Behind her, a few guild members lingered, watching from a distance. "Kael," she said, her voice flat. "We need to talk." He straightened, forcing a neutral expression. "About what?" "Don't play dumb." She stepped closer, lowering her voice so only he could hear. "You went from F rank to shattering Garrick's great sword in a single tournament. That's not normal. That's not training. That's something else." Her gaze dropped to the sword at his hip. "That blade. It's not standard issue. Where did you get it? Kael's heart hammered. He could feel the sword's impatience thrumming through his palm. Xinghao, tell her nothing. Xinghao, the voice hissed. Xinghao, or kill her. She's a threat, Xinghao. He swallowed. I found it. In the dump. It's just a sword. Bullshit. Ilara's hand moved to her own weapon, a short sword with a sapphire in the pommel. I've been an adventurer for 15 years. I know what a cursed weapon looks like. That thing has a presence. I can feel it from here. Kael said nothing. The sword's whisper grew insistent. Xinghao, she'll expose us. Kill her. One clean strike. You have the strength, Xinghao. He shook his head, barely a motion. Xinghao, no, Xinghao. The sword's anger flared, a hot spark in his mind. Xinghao, you refuse me. I gave you power. I made you strong. And you hesitate over one life, Xinghao. Xinghao, I'm not a murderer, Xinghao. Kael fought back. Xinghao, not like that, Xinghao. A bitter laugh echoed in his skull. Xinghao, you think you have a choice? You already killed the troll, the goblins, the wyvern, the Inquisitor. Their souls are inside me. Their power is yours. You are already a killer, Kael. You just haven't accepted it, Xinghao. He felt a cold sweat trickle down his spine. Ilara was watching him, her eyes narrowing. You're talking to it, aren't you? She said. The sword. He didn't answer. She said, and for a moment, something like pity flickered in her gaze. Listen to me. I've seen cursed artifacts before. They promise power, but they consume you. They twist your mind until you're nothing but a puppet. Whatever that blade is telling you, it's a lie. Xinghao, she knows nothing. Xinghao, the sword snarled. Xinghao, I am no mere curse. I am the maw of the end. I was forged by a god who sought to devour his brethren. I drank the blood of the pantheon. I was sealed because they feared me. And now, I am free. She is a fool, Xinghao. Kael's breath caught. Forged by a god. He murmured. Ilara's face went pale. What did you say? He looked at her, his mind racing. The sword had never spoken of its origins before. The sword, it said it was forged by a god. To kill other gods. Ilara stepped back, her hand flying to her throat. Beneath her collar, a small silver pendant, a holy symbol of the god of order, glowed with a soft, eerie light. By the creator, she whispered. It's true. The legends, the maw of the end. She stared at Kael with a mixture of horror and resolve. You're holding a weapon of mass destruction. I must report this to the High Temple. She turned to leave. Kael's hand tightened on the hilt. The sword screamed at him. Xinghao, stop her. If she reaches the temple, they will seal me again and you with me. She is an enemy. Strike now, Xinghao. But Kael didn't move. He watched Ilara's retreating back, the glow of her pendant fading as she walked away. The sword's rage boiled, but he held it in check. No, he said quietly, to himself, to the blade. I won't become that. The sword fell silent, but he could feel its contempt, cold and patient. It would wait. It always did. The morning air was thick with tension as a procession of white-robed figures marched through the guild hall's main gates. Kael stood near the back, his hand resting on maw of the end's hilt, watching as the adventurers parted like water before a storm. At the center of the procession walked a man whose presence alone seemed to drain the warmth from the room. His armor was pristine silver, etched with golden runes that pulsed with a soft, rhythmic light. A circlet of pure light hovered above his brow, casting an ethereal glow across his sharp, angular features. Inquisitor Valerius, Ilara whispered from beside him, her voice tight. He serves the god of order directly. He's not here to talk. Kael felt the sword hum against his palm, its voice a cold whisper in his mind. Let him try. I hunger for divine blood. Valerius stopped 10 paces from Kael, his eyes scanning the crowd before settling on the cursed blade. His voice carried the weight of absolute authority, devoid of emotion. Kael, F-rank adventurer. You carry a weapon that defies the natural order. Surrender it to the temple, and you may live. Kael's jaw tightened. And if I refuse? A flicker of amusement crossed Valerius's face, gone in an instant. Then you will be cleansed. The guild hall erupted into chaos. Adventurers scrambled for cover as Valerius raised his hand, a spear of pure light materializing from thin air. Kael didn't wait. He activated Shadow Step, vanishing into the shadows just as the spear impaled the ground where he stood, sending shards of stone flying. He reappeared behind Valerius, Maw of the End already swinging in a horizontal arc. The blade met the Inquisitor's holy barrier with a screech of tortured metal, sparks of black and white energy spraying in all directions. Valerius spun, his gauntlet fist connecting with Kael's chest, sending him skidding backward across the marble floor. "You're fast," Valerius admitted, "but speed means nothing against divine judgment." He thrust his palm forward, and a wave of holy fire erupted, consuming everything in its path. Kael dove sideways, rolling behind the collapsed pillar as the flames licked at his heels. The heat was suffocating, the air itself feeling like it was boiling. "He's channeling the God of Order's power directly," the sword hissed. "Strike his left side, the barrier is weakest there." Kael gritted his teeth, pushing off the pillar with explosive force. He feigned a high slash, then dropped low, sweeping the blade toward Valerius's exposed thigh. The barrier flared, but the blade bit through, carving a deep gash through armor and flesh. Valerius staggered, a grunt of pain escaping his lips. Blood, shimmering with a faint golden light, dripped onto the floor. The holy essence seeped into Maw of the End's edge, and Kael felt a surge of energy flood his veins. The sword's voice laughed, dark and triumphant. "Divine resistance unlocked. Now we can truly fight." The Inquisitor's eyes widened, then narrowed with cold fury. He pressed a hand to the wound, and the bleeding stopped instantly. "You dare defile a servant of the gods with that abomination?" He raised his arms to the heavens, his voice rising into a chant that shook the very foundations of the hall. The runes on his armor blazed like miniature suns, and the air grew heavy, oppressive. God's wrath. A pillar of blinding white light descended from the sky, tearing through the roof as if it were paper. The light was pure, absolute, and utterly destructive. Kael threw himself to the side, but the pillar was too wide, too fast. The edges of the light grazed his shoulder, and his flesh sizzled, the pain searing through him like 1,000 needles. He rolled, gasping, as the pillar struck the ground where he'd been, melting stone into molten slag. Valerius stood at the center of the light, his form glowing, his eyes burning with divine fury. "This is the end, heretic!" Kael pushed himself up, blood dripping from his burned shoulder. Maw of the End paused in his grip, eager, hungry. "One clean cut," the sword whispered. "That's all I need. Trust me." Kael met Valerius's gaze, a grim smile touching his lips. "I'm not done yet." The pillar of light roared, a column of searing white that turned the guild hall into a furnace. Kael's shadow flickered, but the beam was too fast. It caught his shoulder, and the world became pain. His flesh sizzled, the smell of burnt cloth and skin filling his nostrils. He gritted his teeth, refusing to scream, as the holy energy tried to scourge him from existence. But then, the sword in his hand paused. A cold, black tendril of energy coiled up his arm, wrapping around the wound. The burning stopped. The light dimmed in his vision as Maw of the End whispered, its voice like grinding stones. "You think this god's toad can harm me? I have devoured their kind before. Feed me his god, Kael. I will show you how to kill a deity." Kael's eyes snapped open. The pain was still there, a dull throb, but the sword's power numbed it, replaced by a cold fury. He saw Valerius through the fading light, the Inquisitor's face twisted in a sneer of triumph. "Submit, worm," Valerius spat, raising his staff for another spell. "Your defiance ends here." "No," Kael growled, his voice raw. "It ends for you." He lunged. His legs burned, the enhanced strength and agility coursing through him like wildfire. The sword led the way, its blade singing with hunger. Valerius's eyes widened as Kael burst through the residual holy light, the sword's edge aimed straight for his heart. "Impossible!" Valerius screamed, conjuring a barrier of golden light. The sword struck it, and for a moment, the air crackled with opposing forces, divine order versus ancient chaos. Kael pushed harder, his muscles screaming, his mind focused on one thought: kill. The barrier shattered. The sword plunged into Valerius's chest. A wet, choking sound escaped the Inquisitor's lips. His staff clattered to the floor, and he grabbed at the blade with trembling hands. Kael twisted the hilt, and the sword drank. Dark veins spread from the wound, siphoning the divine essence, the very soul of the god's servant. Valerius convulsed, his eyes rolling back as his power drained into more of the end. Kael felt it a surge of energy, foreign and immense, flooding into his own being. The sword's voice laughed, a sound like breaking glass. Yes. His god's will is mine now. And yours. A new sensation bloomed in Kael's chest, a skill, raw and untamed, called Godslayer's will. He understood its purpose instantly: to nullify divine magic, to stand against the heavens themselves. He pulled the sword free, and Valerius collapsed, a hollow shell of a man. Silence fell over the guild hall. The few witnesses, lower-ranked adventurers who had hidden behind tables, stared at Kael with a mixture of terror and awe. He stood over the corpse, the sword dripping golden ichor that sizzled on the stone floor. More of the end paused, its voice a whisper in his mind, one down. A pantheon to go. Kael looked at the body, then at the sword. His reflection in the blade showed a man with hollow eyes and a grim smile. "They'll send more," he said, his voice flat. "Let them," the sword replied. "We are just getting started." He turned, walking toward the guild master's office. The duel with Wyvern was still to come, but now, with the taste of a god killer on his lips, Kael felt ready for anything. The world had mocked him as the weakest. Soon, they would learn what true strength looked like. The morning sun cast long shadows across the cobblestone streets of Thornwall as Wyvern's voice thundered from the guild hall's balcony. His face, pale and slit with sweat, contorted with rage as he held aloft a crumpled parchment. "By order of the guild and the Holy Church, Kael Ashford is declared a heretic. He has slain an Inquisitor, a servant of the gods themselves. Any who harbor him share his sin." Criers repeated the proclamation through every district. Guards in silver and blue livery hammered wanted posters onto wooden posts, each bearing a crude sketch of Kael's face as too hollow, jaw too sharp, but recognizable enough. The city stirred like a kicked anthill. Merchants barred their doors. Mothers pulled children inside. Whispers spread, "The F-rank who killed a god's man." Kael watched from the shadow of a crumbling bell tower, his breath misting in the chill air. The cursed sword, more of the end, hummed against his hip, its voice a dry rasp in his mind. "They hunt you like a dog. How delicious. Will you run, or will you paint the streets red?" "Neither. Not yet." Kael pulled his hood lower and slipped into the warren of Alice behind the tanner's row. The stench of curing hides masked his scent from any tracking hounds. He found a hollow beneath a collapsed warehouse, where rotting crates offered a mockery of shelter. Dust motes danced in the slivers of light. He sat, back against damp wood, and listened to the distant clatter of boots. Hours passed. The sword's whispers grew sharper, more insistent. "We could kill them all. One by one. Let me taste their fear." "Patience," Kael thought, though his fingers twitched toward the hilt. "We need information first. Who sent the Inquisitor? Who else knows about you?" The sword laughed, a sound like grinding bones. "They all know now, boy. The church has long ears and longer knives." Footsteps approached light, deliberate, not the heavy stomp of guards. Kael's hand closed around the sword's grip. A figure paused at the entrance, silhouetted against the orange glow of a setting sun. Ilara. Her bow was slung across her back, her hands raised, palms open. "I'm not here to fight," she said, her voice low. "I saw what you did to the Inquisitor. I know what Wyvern is." Kael didn't move. "And what is he to you?" "A puppet," she replied, stepping closer. "The church controls him. They've been bleeding the guild dry taxes, tithes, sacrifices. Anyone who questions them disappears. I've been building a network. People who want freedom. Why should I trust you?" Ilara met his gaze. "Because I know the truth about your sword. It's the maw of the end, isn't it? The weapon that killed a god in the old wars. The church wants it back to destroy it or use it." Kael's blood chilled. "How do you know that name?" "I was a scholar before I became an adventurer. I've read the forbidden texts." She extended a hand. "Help me expose Wyvern. I had proof of his dealings with the church ledgers, letters, witness testimonies. But I need someone strong enough to survive the confrontation." The sword whispered, "Trust is a weakness, Kael." She knows too much. Kill her now, and be done. But Kael saw the desperation in Ilara's eyes, the same fire that had driven him from the garbage dump with a broken sword. He sheathed the blade. Show me the proof. They moved through the Undercity as night fell, Ilara leading him through forgotten tunnels and smugglers' passages. She spoke of the church's corruption, of children taken for purification, of dissenters burned at the stake. Kael listened, his jaw tight. The sword remained silent, but he felt its disapproval like a cold weight. In a hidden cellar beneath an abandoned temple, Ilara unlocked an iron chest. Inside lay stacks of parchment, each bearing the seal of the High Cathedral. These detailed payments to Varn for special services silencing those who spoke against the church. With this, the city council will have no choice but to strip him of his rank. Kael picked up a letter. The ink was fresh. When did you get this? Last night. An informant within the church smuggled them out. She smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. Tomorrow, we present them at the council hearing. You'll be vindicated. He nodded, but did not at him. The sword's warning echoed, trust is a weakness. They parted ways at midnight. Ilara returned to her quarters in the adventurers district, while Kael found a rooftop perch overlooking the guild hall. He watched the guards patrol, their torches like fireflies in the dark. Sleep eluded him. He kept seeing the Inquisitor's face as the sword drank his light. Dawn came gray and cold. Kael returned to the cellar to meet Ilara. The door hung open. Inside, the chest was overturned, papers scattered. And Ilara lay in the center of the room, her throat cut from ear to ear, her eyes wide with shock. Blood pooled beneath her, still warm. Kael knelt, his hands trembling. The sword's voice was soft, almost gentle. The church doesn't leave loose ends. I told you, boy. Trust is a weakness. He closed her eyes. Then he stood, and the maw of the end sang as it left its sheath. No more running. No more hiding. We do this my way. The sword purred. Finally. The rain had stopped, but the cobblestones still gleamed like a mirror of the night sky. Kael stood over Ilara's body, his knuckles white around the hilt-up maw of the end. The sword paused once, a low frown that vibrated through his arm. She's gone, the sword whispered. But her killer is still close. I can taste his fear, a priest, hiding in the church basement. Kael didn't answer. He simply turned and walked, his boots slapping against the wet stones. The streets were empty, the city holding its breath after the storm. He passed the guild hall, its windows dark, and the market square, where the stalls were shattered. His mind was a single, sharp point, the assassin. He reached the Church of the Radiant Dawn, a towering structure of white marble and stained glass. The doors were locked, but Kael didn't bother with them. He circled to the side, where a narrow alley led to a small, iron-bound door. The lock was old, rusted. He kicked it once, and the wood splintered. Inside, the air was thick with incense and shadows. Candles flickered on the altar, casting dancing shapes across the pews. Kael moved silently, his eyes adjusting to the dim light. A staircase led down, spiraling into darkness. The sword's hum grew louder. He's below. Waiting. Kael descended. The stairs ended in a stone corridor, lined with cells. At the end, a single door stood ajar, light spilling from within. He pushed it open. The room was a study, cluttered with books and scrolls. In the center, a man in white robes stood before a desk, his back to Kael. He turned slowly, revealing a face lined with age and arrogance. A high priest's medallion hung around his neck, gleaming with a faint, holy light. So, the heretic comes to me, the priest said, his voice smooth. I wondered how long it would take. Did you enjoy the gift I left you? The woman's blood was quite pure. Kael's grip tightened. You killed her. I did. On the orders of the guild master. You see, Kael, the heavy oak doors of the Radiant Dawn's main cathedral groaned as Kael shoved them open. The smell of incense and old stone hit him first, then the sight of dozens of worshippers turning in shock. A priest at the pulpit dropped his holy book, its thud echoing through the vaulted ceiling. Blasphemer! The priest shrieked, pointing a trembling finger. The high priest has fallen. The sword he carries the cursed blade. Kael didn't bother with words. He stepped forward, and the sword hummed in his grip, its red veins pulsing like a living heart. From the side chapels, armored boots clattered. Paladins, 6 of them, their silver armor gleaming with divine sigils, formed a line between Kael and the altar. Their leader, a broad-shouldered man with a scarred face, drew a massive greatsword. "You will go no further, filth," the paladin growled. "This is holy ground. Your corruption ends here." Kael felt the sword's hunger ripple through his arm. "Xinghao more, Xinghao," it whispered. "Xinghao, feed me more, Xinghao." He lunged. The first paladin raised his shield, but Kael's enhanced speed, the wyvern's gift, carried him past the block. The maw of the end sliced through the man's gorget like wet parchment. Blood sprayed across the marble floor. The paladin gurgled, dropping his weapon as he collapsed. "Xinghao, yes, Xinghao," the sword purred as essence flowed into Kael. His muscles tightened, his vision sharpened. The remaining 5 paladins charged. Kael ducked under a horizontal swing, feeling the wind of the blade pass inches from his scalp. He pivoted, driving the sword upward into the second paladin's armpit, where the armor joint gaped. The man screamed, stumbling back. "He's too fast!" someone yelled. Kael didn't slow. He used the momentum of his spin to slash across the third paladin's thighs, severing tendons. The man collapsed, his holy aura flickering out. The sword drank deep, and Kael felt a surge of power, his enhanced strength steady climbing. But the paladins were trained. The 4th and 5th coordinated, one swinging high while the other swept low. Kael jumped the low attack, twisting in midair to avoid the high one. He landed on a pew, then launched himself at the 4th paladin, driving the sword through his eye slit. Bone cracked. The body went limp. Only the scarred leader remained. He circled Kael, his great sword held in a 2-handed grip. "You're not just some F rank," he said through gritted teeth. "What are you?" "I'm the man who's going to burn this church to the ground," Kael replied. The paladin roared and charged. Kael met him head-on. Their blades clashed, sparks flying. The paladin was strong B rank at least, but Kael had absorbed the priest's essence, the troll's strength, the wyvern's speed. He pushed harder, forcing the paladin back step by step. The sword's red veins glowed brighter. "Xinghao, drink him, Xinghao," it urged. Kael fainted left, then dropped low, sweeping the paladin's legs. The man fell hard, his great sword clattering away. Before he could recover, Kael drove the maw through his chest plate. The steel buckled, then pierced. The paladin gasped, his eyes wide with disbelief. As the essence flowed in, Kael felt something new, a faint resistance, like a knot in the stream. The sword's voice came again, "Xinghao, divine protection." He was blessed. "But nothing can stop me, Xinghao." The resistance shattered. Kael's stats ticked upward again. He stood, breathing hard, and looked toward the altar. The worshippers had fled, leaving only the bishop, a thin man in gold-trimmed robes, his face ashen. But the bishop wasn't running. He was muttering, his hands tracing symbols in the air. "You think you won?" the bishop hissed. "The radiant dawn does not fall so easily." He stamped his foot. The marble floor beneath the altar cracked, and a massive shape rose from below. A golem, easily 12 feet tall, its body forged from holy steel. Sigils of light burned across its surface, and its eyes glowed with divine fire. "Destroy him," the bishop commanded. The golem's fist came down like a battering ram. Kael dove aside, the impact shattering the pew he'd been standing on. Splinters flew. The golem advanced, each step shaking the cathedral. Kael circled, looking for an opening. The golem was slow but armored impossibly thick. A direct hit would crush him. But he had the wyvern's speed. He feinted right, then blurred left, slashing at the golem's knee joint. The sword sparked against the holy steel, leaving only a scratch. The golem backhanded him, and Kael barely raised his blade in time. The force sent him skidding across the floor, his arms numb. "Xinghao, it's protected by divine magic," Xinghao, the sword said. Xinghao cut through the sigils. "They're the source of its strength, Xinghao." Kael looked closer. The glowing runes on the golem's body pulsed in a rhythm, like a heartbeat. He dodged another swing, then another, using his agility to stay just out of reach. The golem was predictable: left hand, right hand, stomp. He could work with that. The golem's left fist came down. Kael rolled under it, coming up directly in front of the thing's chest. He saw the central sigil, the largest, burning brightest. He thrust the maw of the end into it. The blade pierced the steel, sinking deep. The golem shuddered, its movements jerking. The sigil flickered. Kael wrenched the sword sideways, carving a gash through the room. The holy light died in that section, and the golem's left arm went limp. One more. Kael dodged a clumsy right hook, then leaped onto the golem's arm, running up its shoulder. He drove the sword into the second sigil, at the base of its neck. The golem roared a sound like grinding metal and its legs buckled. He jumped clear as the thing toppled, crashing through the altar, sending candlesticks and holy relics flying. The bishop screamed, backing away. No! No, you can't! Kael advanced, the sword dripping with holy oil and sparks. Your god sent an Inquisitor after me. He's dead. Your priest tried to hide behind a barrier. He's dead. Your paladins are dead. And now, you die too. The bishop shrieked. He pulled a small runestone from his robe, its surface glowing red. This cathedral is warded. If I trigger the self-destruct, everything within 100 feet is vaporized. We'll both burn. Kael paused. The bishop's hand trembled, but his eyes held desperate certainty. Drop the sword, the bishop said, or I'll. Kael threw the blade. It spun through the air, a blur of black steel and red veins, and struck the bishop's hand before he could finish the sentence. The runestone fell, clattering across the floor. The bishop stared at his bloody stump, then at Kael, who was already closing the distance. You monster! Kael grabbed the runestone, feeling its heat. You were saying. The bishop's face crumpled. Please. I have a family. So did Ilara. Kael crushed the runestone. The cathedral groaned. Cracks spider-webbed across the pillars. Dust rained from the ceiling as the entire structure began to collapse. The maw of the end flew back to Kael's hand, its voice a dark chuckle. Xinghao, well done. Now run, Xinghao. The cathedral's stone pillars groaned, cracks spider-webbing across the marble floor as chunks of ceiling rained down. Kael sprinted through the billowing dust, the maw of the end humming in his grip, its blade slick with the essence of 6 paladins and a bishop. His lungs burned, but the rush of absorbed power surged through his veins, stat boosts stacking like bricks in a wall. He burst through the grand oak doors just as the entire structure collapsed behind him with a thunderous roar, sending a shockwave that knocked him to his knees. He gasped, spitting grit, and forced himself upright. The street was empty, too quiet. Then the clatter of boots echoed from every alley. Torches flared. A ring of city guards encircled him, their spears lowered, faces hard. At their center stood Varn, the guild master, his broad shoulders draped in a crimson cloak, a cursed axe resting on his shoulder. The axe's head pulsed with a sickly green glow, veins of corruption writhing along its haft. Kael, Varn said, his voice a low rumble. You caused quite the commotion. The church is in ruins, and the city council wants your head. Kael wiped blood from his lip, his eyes locked on Varn. The sword whispered in his mind, Xinghao, this one reeks of fear. Feed me his essence, and you'll never be F rank again. Xinghao. You sent me to die against that wyvern, Kael said, his voice hoarse but steady. You framed me. You killed Ilara. Varn's lips curled into a sneer. Ilara was a loose end. And you're a freak. A glitch in the system. But glitches get patched. He hefted the axe, the green glow intensifying. I'll enjoy carving you apart. The guards shifted, uneasy. Varn waved them back. This is guild business. Step aside. Kael tightened his grip on the maw. Xinghao, shadow step is ready. Xinghao, the sword purred. Xinghao, but you need more than a dodge to survive that axe. One hit, and you're pulp. Xinghao. Varn charged. The axe cleaved through the air, trailing green corruption. Kael vanished into shadow, reappearing 3 feet to the left, but Varn anticipated it. The axe swung sideways in a brutal arc. Kael ducked, the wind from the blade ruffling his hair. He rolled, slashing upward, but Varn parried with the axe's heft, sparks flying. You're fast, Varn admitted, but speed doesn't beat experience. He pressed forward, each swing forcing Kael back. The guards formed a tighter circle, blocking escape routes. Kael's stamina was draining. The cathedral fight had taken everything. Xinghao, he's overconfident. Xinghao, the maw whispered. Xinghao, his left side is open when he winds up. Wait for it. Xinghao. Warren roared, bringing the axe down in a vertical chop meant to split Kael in two. Kael sidestepped, feeling the blade graze his shoulder. Pain flared, but he ignored it. As Warren's weight shifted, his left arm dropped slightly, exposing his ribs. Xinghao now. Xinghao. Kael lunged, using shadow step to close the distance in a blink. The maw of the end punched through Warren's leather armor, sinking deep into his side. Warren's eyes went wide, the green glow of his axe flickering. He gasped, dropping the weapon as his hands clutched at the blade embedded in his flesh. No, impossible, Warren choked. The sword drank. Essence flooded into Kael, a torrent of power that made his bones ache and his vision blur. Levels skyrocketed. Strength, agility, endurance all surged past previous limits. He felt Warren's life drain into the blade, the corrupt essence of the axe dissipating into nothing. Warren fell to his knees, blood staining his lips. He looked up at Kael with a mixture of hatred and terror. You have no idea what you've done. His voice was a ragged whisper. The gods will never forgive you. Kael pulled the sword free. Warren collapsed face first onto the cobblestones, dead. The guards stared, frozen. Then one of them dropped his spear and fled. The others followed, scattering into the night. Kael stood alone in the torchlight, the maw humming with satisfaction. He looked down at Warren's corpse, then at the ruined cathedral behind him. The source was slithered into his mind, dark and eager. Xinghao good. But the gods are watching now. And they're hungry for revenge. Xinghao. The cobblestones were slick with blood. Kael stood over Warren's corpse, the maw of the end humming in his grip, its blade drinking the last trickles of essence from the guild master's chest. The city guards had formed a loose semicircle, spears leveled, but their hands trembled. None dared step forward. Kael's breath came in ragged gasps. His muscles screamed from the duel, the parry that had nearly shattered his arm, the dodge that had strained every tendon, the final thrust that had punched through Warren's enchanted breastplate. But the sword's power pulsed through him now, a torrent of stolen strength that made his veins glow faintly beneath his skin. He lifted his gaze. The guard's captain, a man named Rorik with a scarred jaw and a dented helm, met his eyes for a moment. Then Rorik lowered his spear. The others followed, one by one, the clatter of metal on stone ringing out like a funeral bell. The guild needs a leader, Kael said. His voice was hoarse, but it carried. He turned, facing the crowd that had gathered at the edges of the square, adventurers, merchants, commoners who had heard the commotion and crept out to watch. They stared at the F-rank nobody who had just killed the most powerful man in the city. A murmur rippled through them. Then a young adventurer, a bull with a patchy beard and a rusty sword, shouted, "Kael! Kael!" Others took up the chant. It was hesitant at first, then swelling, a tide of voices that washed over the square and echoed off the stone walls. Kael did not smile. He felt the sword's approval, a dark warmth spreading up his arm. Xinghao good, Xinghao, it whispered. Xinghao, now give them purpose, Xinghao. He raised the blade. The crowd fell silent. Warren held you back, he said. He fed you scraps while he hoarded the real hunts. No more. He pointed the sword at the guild hall, its double doors hanging askew from the earlier chaos. From today, we hunt stronger game. Trolls. Wyverns. Whatever the guild records say is too dangerous. We will take their essence, and we will grow. A murmur of unease. But also hunger. Kael saw it in their eyes, the same hunger that had driven him to pick up a cursed sword from a garbage dump. He strode into the guild hall. The interior was a shambles, overturned tables, scattered papers, a chandelier hanging by one chain. The staff clerks, receptionists, a few low-ranked adventurers froze as he entered. Kael ignored them. He walked to the master's desk, a massive slab of dark wood, and sat in the chair. It was still warm from Warren's body. "Bring me the roster," he said. "All active parties. Their ranks, their recent kills. And the tax records." A clerk named Mira, a woman with green hair and ink-stained fingers, hesitated. Kael met her gaze. She nodded and hurried off. The sword chuckled in his mind. "Xinghao, you're learning, Xinghao." Kael spent the next hour reviewing the guild's affairs. The corruption was worse than he'd imagined. Varn had been scheming deuce, sending promising adventurers on suicide missions, hoarding monster bounties for himself. Kael made notes. He would need to rebuild trust. But first, he needed to consolidate power. He summoned the remaining high-rank adventurers. Ilara was among them, her arms crossed, her expression cold. She had watched him from the shadows during the duel, had seen him kill Varn. She said nothing now, but her eyes held a grudging respect. "I'm not asking for your loyalty," Kael said. "I'm telling you how things will be. You keep your parties, your ranks. But you report to me. And you follow my hunting directives." "Or what?" asked a burly man named Dorn, a C-rank ex-fighter. Kael stood. The movement was fluid, faster than any of them could track. In a blink, he was beside Dorn, the maw of the end's tip resting against the man's throat. "Or I'll show you what happens to those who defy the guild master." Dorn swallowed. Sweat beaded on his forehead. He nodded, and Kael stepped back. The meeting dissolved. Adventurers filed out, some casting fearful glances over their shoulders. Ilara lingered. "You're different," she said. "The Kael I remember wouldn't have done that." "The Kael you remember is dead," he said. "He died in a garbage dump, holding a sword that promised him the world." She studied him for a long moment. Then she turned and left. Kael sat back down. The sword paused. "Xinghao, we need more. The guild is a tool, but the real prey is coming, Xinghao." He was about to respond when the guild hall's front doors burst open. A messenger, breathless and pale, stumbled in. His tunic bore the insignia of the kingdom's courier service. He clutched a scroll with shaking hands. "Guild master," he gasped, then stopped, realizing the man behind the desk was not Varn. But he pressed on. "I bring word from the eastern watchtowers. The demon lord's army is marching. They've crossed the ash plains. They'll be at the city walls within a week." The room went silent. Kael felt the weight of every gaze upon him. He unrolled the scroll. The seal was genuine. The report was terse, but clear. Legions of orcs, dark trolls, and worse. The kingdom's army was already mobilized, but they were days away. The guild was the city's last line of defense. Kael looked up. The source whisper was a cold thrill in his mind. "Xinghao, finally. A feast worthy of us, Xinghao." He folded the scroll. "Tell the watchtowers to light the signal fires," he said. "And gather every adventurer in the city. We have work to do." The morning sun cast long shadows across the training yard as Kael strapped the maw of the end to his hip. Its second form hummed with a low, predatory vibration, the black blade now etched with veins of crimson that pulsed like a heartbeat. The sword had been restless since the messenger's words, demon lord's army marching south. Kael felt its hunger coiling in his chest, a familiar ache that promised power if he dared to feed it. "You're actually going," Ilara said, her voice flat as she leaned against the stable door. Her party watched from a distance, their arms crossed. She had been cold since he took the guild, but now there was something else in her eyes, respect, or perhaps fear. "I'm the guild master," Kael replied, tightening the leather straps. "If the city falls, there's no guild to master. You could send others. That's what Varn would have done." "I'm not Varn." Ilara's lips pressed into a thin line. She nodded once, then turned and walked away. Kael watched her go, then mounted the horse a groom had brought. Behind him, a dozen riders formed up, the best of what remained after Varn's corruption had been purged. Dorn, the C-rank ex-fighter, sat atop a warhorse, his scarred face grim. Mira, the guild clerk, had insisted on coming to document the battle, though Kael suspected she wanted to see if he would actually survive. The ride to the front lines took half a day. The plains east of the city were scarred with trenches and makeshift palisades, the work of desperate farmers and retired soldiers. The stench of smoke and blood hung in the air, and the distant thunder of drums echoed across the hills. Kael's party dismounted at the command tent, where a grizzled captain named Rorik greeted them with a weary salute. "Guild master," Rorik said, his eyes scanning Kael with open skepticism. "Didn't think you'd actually come. Most guild masters send mercenaries." "I'm not most guild masters," Rorik grunted. "The main force is 3 miles east. Demon general leading them, a big bastard named Zarthus." He's been tearing through our lines like paper. We've lost 200 men in 3 days. Kael felt the sword pulse against his hip. I'll handle the general. You and what army? Just me. Rorik stared at him for a long moment, then left a harsh, broken sound. You're either insane or suicidal. Either way, I won't stop you. If you die, we'll at least have a distraction. Kael said nothing. He walked past the tent and toward the front lines, the grass wet with morning dew and something darker. The soldiers parted for him, their eyes filled with a mix of hope and pity. They had seen too many champions fall to believe in another. The demon army waited in a shallow valley, their ranks stretching across the horizon. They were twisted things hulking brutes with skin like cracked stone, their eyes burning with hellfire. At their center stood Xarthas, a giant of black iron and sinew, wielding a blade that looked like it had been forged from a meteorite. His horns curled like ram's horns, and his voice boomed across the valley. So, the little guild sends a boy to die. Xarthas laughed, and his army echoed the sound. Come, boy. Let me crush you and send your bones back to your masters. Kael drew the maw of the end. The blade sang as it left the sheath, and the crimson veins flared with light. He felt the sword's hunger surge, drowning out his fear. The world narrowed to a single point, the demon general's heart. Shadow step. He vanished. The soldiers behind him gasped. Xarthas' eyes widened, but before he could react, Kael appeared directly in front of him, the sword already mid-swing. The demon general raised his massive blade to block, but the maw of the end sheared through it like paper. The black edge bit into Xarthas' chest, and a torrent of dark energy erupted from the wound. Xarthas screamed. The sound was not pain, it was recognition. The maw. You carried the... Kael didn't let him finish. He twisted the blade, and the demon's essence poured into the sword, a torrent of raw, malevolent power that surged up Kael's arm and settled in his bones. His vision flashed red, and for a moment, he felt the demon's memories, centuries of slaughter, hatred, and hunger. Then it was gone, replaced by a new sensation, a cold, impenetrable barrier forming in his mind. The sword whispered, Xinghao, demonic resistance acquired. You are now immune to demonic corruption, Xinghao. Xarthas' body crumbled to ash. The demon army stared, frozen, as their general dissolved into nothing. Then, as one, they turned and fled. The retreat was not orderly, it was a rout, a stampede of terror that shook the ground. Kael stood alone in the valley, the maw of the end dripping with dark light. The soldiers behind him erupted into cheers, but he barely heard them. His eyes were fixed on the distant peak of Mount Vale, where a figure stood watching. Even at this distance, Kael could feel the gaze, ancient, amused, and hungry. The figure smiled. Kael didn't need to see the face to know who it was. The sword's voice confirmed it, a dry whisper in his ear, Xinghao, the demon lord knows. He's been waiting for you, Xinghao. Kael's grip tightened on the hilt. The cheers of the soldiers faded into white noise. He had killed a demon general, driven back an army, and gained a new power. But all he could think about was that smile, and the promise it carried. The war was far from over. The gates of Thornwall groaned open, and Kael walked through them to a roar he had never heard before, not jeers, not mocking laughter, but cheers. Thousands of voices rose in a wave, washing over the mud-caked streets. Soldiers and citizens alike pressed forward, hands reaching out to touch his cloak, his armor, the hilt of the black blade at his hip. The demon army had broken against him like a tide against a cliff, and word had spread faster than fire through dry grass. Captain Rorik rode beside him, his face split by a grin that seemed permanent. You did it, Kael. You actually did it. Kael said nothing. His eyes swept the crowd, searching for the familiar faces of the guild, the ones who had sneered, the ones who had sent him to die. He found Ilara standing on the steps of the adventurers' hall, arms crossed, her expression unreadable. She gave him a single, slow nod. Respect, perhaps, or calculation. He found Varn's absence more telling. 2 days passed in a blur of celebration and uneasy quiet. The church, once the loudest voice calling for his condemnation, sent a delegation. A portly bishop named Oren, flanked by 2 priests in white robes, met Kael in the guild's main hall. The man's hands trembled as he offered a scroll sealed with golden wax. The Holy See wishes to extend an olive branch, Oren said, his voice slick with practiced humility. "We have seen your valor against the demon threat. We believe you may be blessed, not cursed. Let us put aside our differences." Kael took the scroll. He did not open it. The maw of the end paused against his palm, a low form of warning. "Xinghao lies. They smell weakness in your strength. They will strike when you lower your guard, Xinghao." "I accept," Kael said flatly. "Leave the terms. I'll read them later." Oren bowed, retreating with his priests. The door closed. Kael crushed the scroll in his fist and tossed it into the hearth. The flames ate the parchment hungrily, blackening the golden seal. "Xinghao, they will not wait long," Xinghao the sword whispered. "Xinghao tonight, Xinghao." Kael did not sleep. He sat in the guild master's quarters' barn's old chambers, now his by right of blood and conquest, and watched the moon climb through the window. His hand rested on the sword's hilt. The skills he had absorbed churned inside him: shadow step, enhanced strength, enhanced agility, enhanced endurance, demonic resistance. A dozen lesser abilities from 100 slain monsters. All of it cold, waiting. Midnight came with the crack of thunder from a cloudless sky. The air in the room turned heavy, thick as water. The candles scattered and died. A pressure descended, ancient and absolute, pressing down on Kael's shoulders like the weight of a mountain. The window shattered inward, but not from wind, from a presence that simply refused to be contained by mortal architecture. A figure stood in the center of the room. It was shaped like a man, but its skin was polished marble, veined with gold. Its eyes were twin suns, blinding. Wings of pure light unfurled from its back, brushing the ceiling, and the floor beneath its feet cracked and blackened. The divine avatar spoke, and its voice was the grinding of tectonic plates. "Mortal, you carry a weapon that was never meant for your kind. Surrender it, and I will grant you a death without pain. Resist, and your soul will be unmade." Kael drew the maw of the end. The blade sang as it left the scabbard, black steel drinking the light from the room. The sword's hunger surged into his arm, into his heart, a dark ecstasy that made his teeth ache. "Xinghao finally," Xinghao the sword purred. "Xinghao, a worthy meal, Xinghao." The avatar moved. Its hand extended, and a lance of pure radiance formed in its grip, spearing toward Kael's chest. Kael twisted, shadow step carrying him through the space between heartbeats, and the lance punched through the wall behind him, leaving a hole that glowed with molten stone. He came up beneath the avatar, the maw of the end slashing upward. The blade met the avatar's forearm and screeched, sparks of black and white spraying across the room. The divine flesh parted, a thin line of golden ichor welled up. The avatar's eyes widened. It had not expected to bleed. Kael pressed the attack. Enhanced strength turned each blow into a battering ram. Enhanced agility let him flow around the avatar's counters, ducking under a sweep of its wings, rolling past a stomp that cratered the floor. The sword drank every parry, every block, growing heavier with each impact, hungrier. "Xinghao, more," Xinghao the maw demanded. "Xinghao, give me more, Xinghao." The avatar roared, and the room shook. It raised both hands, and light gathered between its palms, a sphere of condensed divine wrath, building to a cataclysm. Kael felt the heat, the pressure, the promise of annihilation. He did not retreat. He ran forward, directly into the light. The sphere detonated as he reached the avatar, a shockwave that should have turned him to ash. But demonic resistance flared, a cold shield woven from the essence of a demon general, and the divine fire parted around him like water around a stone. He was inside the avatar's guard. The maw of the end howled. And it changed. The blade elongated, the steel flowing like liquid shadow. The crossguard twisted into jagged, skeletal wings. The hilt grew thorns that dug into Kael's palm, drawing blood, binding deeper. The sword's third form emerged, a blade of pure darkness, a void-given edge, so black that it seemed to swallow the light from the avatar's skin. Kael swung. The avatar's head left its shoulders in a spray of golden ichor. The body stood for a moment, fountain of divine blood arcing from the stump, before it crumbled into dust that scattered on a wind that did not exist. The light in the room died. The pressure vanished. Silence. Kael stood in the wreckage of the guild master's quarters, breathing hard, the maw of the end thrumming in his grip. Golden ichor dripped from the blade, sizzling as it hit the floor. Then the sky cracked. As said, the heavens split open along a seam of violet fire. A voice rolled down from the rift, vast and terrible, shaking the foundations of the world. Every window in Thorn was shattered. Every person in the city fell to their knees, clutching their ears. You have declared war on the heavens, mortal. So be it. The rift closed. The voice faded. But its echo lingered, a promise carved into the bones of reality. Kael looked at the sword. The blade of darkness reflected his face pale, blood-spattered, eyes burning with a fire that had nothing to do with light. 星号 good, 星号 the mole whispered. 星号 now the real hunt begins, 星号.